All right, so let's define some terms here so we kind of know what we're talking about. So race, like what it would be a definition of race, and then how,
Well, gosh.
yeah,
Go
and then
ahead.
how, and
Sorry.
then the other flip side of it is how does God look at race?
Well, let me start with the biblical position first. Biblically, we don't see the concept of race the way that we do in our current culture in the scriptures. In the scriptures, we see region of origin, we see ethnicity. But to look at race as we do in America, according to the five senses listed on the, or not the five senses, the five races listed on the Census Bureau website, um, races would be categories in which different people fall into. However, scripturally, when we look at ethnicity or region of origin, people are considered, people are identified, is what I'll say, by the place that they come from. So in America, I would be considered Black,
Mhm.
or people would say I am African American. Some people would say African American, but I might have a lineage that goes back to Africa, but I also may not. So looking at me, yes, my darker skin leads me eventually back to Africa. But when I look at my parents, I have a father who is from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and then I have a mom who is from Philadelphia. Our racial categories don't necessarily add up to where someone is specifically from all the time. Another issue with the idea of race that many critical theorists, critical race theorists, especially in social justice warriors or advocates, would say is that race is a social construct. I completely believe that. I believe that this idea of race, of attributing skin color to someone's identity, that is something that was made up. It was a social construct, and it was used for people to benefit off of white skin being better or lighter skin being better than darker skin. We don't see that in the scriptures. In the scriptures, what we see is that this person came from this region. And when we are told that someone comes from a specific region, that's usually attached to the understanding of how close was this person in relationship to God or to the covenant.
Mhm.
How close or how far away was this person from having a relationship with God? So we see in the book of Ruth, we can look at Ruth. Ruth was a Moabitess. She was from the land of Moab. Moab was outside of the covenantal relationship with God. But we see her mother, Naomi, who was a Jew. She was a Hebrew. And so she was closer to the covenant. She was in the covenant. She was God's chosen people. Um, Naomi and her husband actually moved to Moab from the land. I want to say, gosh, it was Bethlehem. I
Right. Yeah.
could be mistaken,
Oh, it's right.
but so we see Naomi and her husband actually moving out of God's providential land for His people. So when we hear of ethnicity or region of origin within the scriptures, it lets us know how close or how far someone is to the covenant. Now, when we look at Ruth, Ruth then moved into Bethlehem. She went home with Naomi. She was still a Moabite, but she came under the laws, traditions, practices, beliefs of the Hebrew people. And so this, I would say, this is the difference in terminology when we look at race today, the social construct um, versus the true and concrete data or definition that we can see in the scriptures based on someone's region of origin.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense as far as, looking at it in that context when we look at the Bible and looking where people came from and how they're related to that. So that makes sense.
Thanks. I hope it does. This is kind of how I break it down. Is yes, our modern day concept of race is a social construct. When we look at attributing skin color to a ethnic category, so to speak, or to a group of people, um, you know. it historically has been for the benefit of a structure, a class structure, or some kind of systemic structure. But as Christians, we don't participate according to that. So as a Christian, I might be interested in your region of origin. I might be interested in your ethnic background, but I'm not going to classify you according to race necessarily. I would also even probably go beyond that and say that in the New Testament, we don't see the concept of race, because as Paul says, there's neither Jew nor Gentile, Greek nor Scythian, slave nor free, but you are either in Christ or you are in Adam. These are the new structures that have been set up because of the work of Jesus. So when I am, at church or in a community with believers, what I understand is this person isn't white, black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever. This person is in Christ. And what does it mean to be in Christ? Wearing Christ as our new identity.
Right, yeah. That does. I'm glad you made that distinction as far as, the Old Testament and the New Testament, as far as, us being in Christ and then not in Christ. So God sees color because he made up all of us, colorful. But he's looking for whether we're with him or we're not with him, as far as, that distinction.
Yes. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the idea of skin color and melanin. We see that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that God was intentional in how he, makes people. Like no one has been made by accident. And yet when we read in Acts, it says that from one man, God made all the nations. It was in Adam. There was something providentially within Adam that allowed for our skin color, our pigmentation, melanation. I don't even know if that's a word, but for our melanin to adapt to the region in which people migrated. And so to think about skin color, it's really helpful to think of it as an issue of God's providence, that God did not make, seven different people in the beginning, or different ethnic groups in the beginning. No, it was from one man. God made Adam and he made Eve. And within the DNA structure of Adam and Eve laid the possibility and the potential for different skin colors as people migrated. It's definitely a providential component to us.
Mm-hmm.